Okay, good evening, everyone. And we are holding here in PARSHAS BIMIDBAR, beginning a new book in the Chumash this week. And we're holding just a few days away from the beautiful Yom Tov of Shavuos. So we'll try to fuse together the Parsha BIMIDBAR and perhaps an idea or two about Shavuos as well. We're holding not only in that, but tonight begins what's called the Shloishes Yimei Hagbala. It's called the 3 days of Hagbala, where the Jewish people were told to refrain and stay away from Har Sinai. And they were told, as it says in the Chumash over here, prepare yourselves for 3 days. Do not come close. So it says in the Torah over here that the 3 days before we received the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told everybody that they must prepare themselves properly. And the proper preparation is to abstain from marital relations. And the reason being because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make sure that when everybody came to Har Sinai, they came in the greatest level of purity that could possibly be. Since that we know that someone that has relations, there is seed that is spilled, and therefore there's a level of impurity that is there. Hashem wanted to make sure everybody was on the greatest level of purity possible. One of the other reasons, perhaps as we shall see tonight, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that Klal Yisrael, when we would stand by the Har Sinai and we would receive the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that we would be on the highest level of our ruchnius, of our spirituality as possible. The least amount of immersion in the physical world, the most distant that we can be from the taivas of Olam Hazeh, the pleasures of this world, that we should be someone that was ready to unite ourselves as one with the most ruchnius, the most spiritual thing in the world, which is the Torah. And that's why it's never a coincidence that either on the Shabbos right before Shavuos, or the one right before, or the one before that, we always read Parshas Bimidbar. Because Bimidbar tells us in the very beginning, as the Midrash points out, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai. Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu in Midbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. Now, what are we supposed to learn out from these words that Hashem spoke to Moshe in Midbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai? We know the entire time they were in the wilderness. What is the putting together of these words, Midbar Sinai? That means that Mount Sinai was in a place that was a wilderness. So says the Gemara, it says the Midrash the following. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai. Hashem spoke to Moshe in Midbar Sinai, in the desert of Sinai. B'shloisha devar nitna Torah. The Torah was given with 3 things: ba'esh, with fire, u'bamayim, with water, u'bamidbar, and it was given in the desert. Ba'esh minayin. How do we know that the Torah was given with fire? Because we know that it's going to say in Parshas Yisro, when the Torah was being given, Var Sinai Ashem Kula Eish, the whole mountain was enveloped in fire. U'bamayim minayin. How do we know it was given with water? Shenemar, like it says, Gam Shemayim netafu, Gam Avim natfu mayim. Says the clouds were bringing down water. There was water as well when the Torah was given. Ubamidbar minayin. How do we know that the Torah was given in the wilderness? Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai, because it says in this week's parsha. If it wouldn't have said it in this week's parsha, apparently you would not have realized that the Torah was given in the wilderness. V'lama nidna b'shloisha dvar malol. Why was the Torah given with these 3 things? And the Midrash answers, just like these 3 things are basically free to anyone who wants. It's not hard to get water. It's not hard to get fire. Fire, you just strike a match and you got it. And it is not hard to find the midbar. You walk into a wilderness, it's yours. It doesn't belong to anybody, as we shall see. So too the words of Torah are free. You don't really have to pay for Torah. You don't really have to buy a word, a mesechta, a shir. You don't have to pay for it. You can walk into any base midrash anywhere in the world. You can go online these days and get everything downloaded for free. You can bank in on one of these sales of books that Art Scroll continues to sell for cheaper and cheaper, and the Torah is free. Doesn't cost any money. Because the things in the world that are necessities, the things in the world that are important, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes them, he makes them free. But the Midrash doesn't stop there. And the Midrash says, and it continues, and it says, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai. Ela kol mi she'eno isa atzmo k'midbar hefker. Anyone who does not make themselves like a unowned desert, an ownerless desert. They are not going to be able to acquire wisdom and Torah. Anyone who does not mafkir themselves, doesn't make themselves ownerless, whatever that will mean, we have to see, that person will not be able to receive the Torah. But if you do make yourself kehefker, you make yourself ownerless, nobody has their paws on you. You are free to go and do whatever you want. Nobody's pulling you or dragging you in any direction. So then, apparently, says the Midrash, you will be able to acquire the Torah. L'kach nemar, like it says, b'midbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. Says the Maharzav, who is one of the Mefarshim on the Midrashim, what does it mean that you make yourself like an ownerless desert? Nothing that this world has to offer bothers you. Nothing that this world has to offer you are consumed with or you are obsessed with. Nothing that's midivei olam from the things of this world is something that is so important that you cannot live without it. And therefore, someone who makes themselves ownerless, which means that they don't have a real deep connection to all the frivolity of this world, so that is the person that will have a chance to be kind to acquire the Torah for themselves. And I have a son who's learning in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. And in this particular yeshiva, the goal of the Rosh Yeshiva and of the Rebbeim is that they take these boys for 1 year and they want to inspire them. They want to get them fired up with the fires of Torah, show them how beautiful it is to be a Yid. And you can really only see that if you live in LA, you have to see it when you get to Eretz Yisrael. And the goal is then you go to Shana Aleph, you go for 1 year. And after that, you stay for Shana Bet, you stay for the second year. And the second year is when you really begin to immerse yourself in the learning. And that's when the change usually comes the most. And that's when a kid can go from being just a wayward soul in Los Angeles to becoming a Ben Torah, a person that is moving in a higher direction. So my wife was talking to my son the other day, and she said, so how many boys are staying for Shana Bet? There's about 170 boys in the first year program. So how many boys are staying for the second year? So he said to my wife, about 40, maybe 50. That means you have 170 boys. They left America behind for 1 whole year. They were exposed to the beauty and the richness and the grandeur of Torah. They went to Bnei Brak, they saw Gedolei Yisrael, they went to the Rebbeim's homes, they sat in the Beis HaMidrash every single day, they were learning and learning and learning. They had incredible experiences in the old city by the Kaisel, Shabbatons and Sfas, all different places. And after 1 year of that magnificent spiritual experience, only 40 guys from all of the country of America, and some of them from England as well, could commit themselves to a second year of learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not telling you yet where my son is holding in this group. We'll find out before the next month is about to start. But how could it be 170 guys exposed to the magnificence and the beauty and the Kedusha of Torah? 130 have decided not worthwhile coming back for a second year, got to get on with life. You're 18, 19 years old. Got to get on with life. Got to keep moving. Got to do something else. What's the pshat? See, 25, 30 years ago, when boys used to go to Eretz Yisrael for a year, so when they got on the plane in LAX or in JFK or in EWR, when they got on that plane and they waved goodbye to their parents, that was sayonara, goodbye, I'll see you next summer. We didn't fly back 2-3 times a year. We did not have FaceTime to keep up with all of our great friends and family in the United States of America. We didn't even have emails at that time in the ancient days. You went and there was one telephone in the entire yeshiva for every guy to use. You never had privacy, so no one's going to spill their beans to their parents and tell them how they really were, what's really going on. It was all general conversations, and you were living in Eretz Yisrael. You were mafkir yourself. You became ownerless from the world that we once came from, and we were able to immerse ourselves, as it says in the Midrash. We're able to acquire the wisdom and the Torah itself. But nowadays, a boy goes to the airport, and when he's saying goodbye to his parents, there's no tears. He says, I'm going to FaceTime you from the plane, Mom. And then when he gets off the plane, he's there in Ben Gurion Airport. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. How you doing? I'm here. I made it here. Look, I'm here. And the whole year, he's not in Eretz Yisrael. The whole year, he's wherever his phone is taking him. He's in LA, he's in New York, he's watching the game, he's over here, he's doing this, he's doing that. He's not there. He's not hefker. He's not making himself ownerless like a midbar to acquire the Torah. He is owned by the world that is around him, and therefore it is very, very difficult for such a young man who is so entrenched in the Welt, in the world, to be able to break themselves away and say, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need that. When I was a bacher in yeshiva in Israel, so every year before the bacher, it works out like 2 or 3 years, you stay in America. And then 3rd, 4th year, when you're like 20 years old, a lot of the boys, they would go to Israel at that time for their 1 or 2 years of learning in Eretz Yisrael. And one of the mashgichim in the yeshiva, Moshe Eisenman, he used to give like a shmooze to the boys every single year, the ones that were leaving and going to Eretz Yisrael. And he used to tell them, you want to succeed in Eretz Yisrael? You want to have the real Eretz Yisrael experience? Leave America behind. If you pack up America in your suitcase, so then you're taking America with you. How are you going to experience Eretz Yisrael? He said, leave your Kleenex boxes behind. He said, buy the sandpaper tissues that everybody else, by the way, over the last 20 years, they got some pretty good tissues in Eretz Yisrael. America reached the shores of Israel and taught them that you have to have softer tissues. But 25 years ago, it was sandpaper when you blew your nose. He said, blow your nose with sandpaper and go and buy the shampoo that everybody else is buying, that that smell of the shampoo in Eretz Yisrael. And make sure that you don't bring in too much of the gashmias, too much of the physicality from America, because if you do, then you are owned and you are not ownerless. And a person that is owned by the world that is around them, it is very difficult for that person to enmesh themselves with the very fiber of what Torah is all about, which is ruchnias, not gashmias. The Torah teaches us how to use the gashmias, how to use our taivas, how to maneuver our way through this world. But the essence of Torah is spirituality, not gashmias, not physicality and desires. So the Midrash is telling us, you want to be someone that's going to be kind of the Torah, that's going to acquire the Torah. You want to be someone that's going to have a real connection, a deep connection with the Eitz Chaim, with the tree of life. So then you have to be clinging to life itself. Life is the less of this world that you are holding on to, the more you can hold on to the Torah. The more of this world that you're holding on to, your hands are full already. How can you hold, a person has like a lot of packages and someone wants to put something else. I have no hands. So if you're holding on to a lot of packages of this world, how would you have extra hands to be able to hold on to the ruchnias of the Torah? So there's a fascinating Gemara, a bit famous. Many of you have heard it before. It speaks about the 2 brother-in-laws in Shas, who were Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish were two of the greatest sages that the Gemara itself speaks about, and they eventually became brother-in-laws. So anyone that knows the history a little bit of Reish Lakish knows that he was once the biggest mafioso. He made Al Capone look like a baby. He was a giant mafioso, a bandit, a highway robber. He walked into town, people trembled in fear. Reish Lakish is here, we're in big trouble. So one day the Gemara says Reish Lakish was Rav Yochanan, and to just understand Rav Yochanan was known as one of the most beautiful men in the world at that time. He didn't have a beard, and his face radiated Kedusha. Rav Yochanan, the Gemara says, right before this, Rav Yochanan said that he would go sit by the exit of the women's mikveh, because he wanted that when the women would walk out of the mikveh and go home to their husbands, they would see the face of this tzaddik, Rav Yochanan. They would see the malachkeit, they would see the angelicness that was on his face. And then when the women would go home, they would have in mind that they want children that are like Rav Yochanan, and they would have tzaddikim as well. He was a pure, unadulterated, angelic Talmid Chacham of a person whose face radiated like nothing else. So one day, Rav Yochanan is bathing in the Jordan River. And Chazir Reish Lakish, this bandit, this mafioso, is walking by the river, and he peeks in, and he sees far in the distance, remember, Rav Yochanan has no beard, and he sees what looks to him like the most beautiful woman that he's ever seen in his entire life. So V'shavar liyardana ubasre. So Reish Lakish, the bandit, never wanted to pass up an opportunity for a little bit of fun. He quickly disrobes himself, and he leaps into the river, and he swims right across, and he gets to Rav Yochanan, only to find out that it's Rav Yochanan, it's not a woman. So Rav Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, when he sees this superhuman strength leaping into the river and landing over there to him, your strength belongs to Torah. What a waste. You have such koyach, you have such strength, and you're putting it into highway robbery, you're plundering and you're pillaging, and you're raping women. That's what you do with your strength. What a waste. So Reish Lakish said back to Rav Yochanan, Shufrach lenoshe, your beauty belongs to women. What a waste of beauty. You're a man, you look like a most beautiful fairest maiden. What a waste. So Rav Yochanan said back to Reish Lakish, if you will do tshuva, and you will stop being such a bandit and a highway robber and a mafioso, and you will end up coming to a life of Torah. I'll give you my sister in marriage, the Shapira Minoi. She's even more beautiful than I am. Is that what you want? You want beauty? You want to know that you have the most beautiful woman in the world? So take my sister. She is a fair maiden. You'll never find anybody as beautiful, but it's on condition. You have to do tshuva. Enough of these shenanigans over here, playing around, stealing from people's homes and the like. Stop instilling fear on other people. Embrace and be makabel, accept the Torah on yourself. Kabel alei. Reish Lakish said, deal. And he accepted the life of Torah on himself in that minute. So Reish Lakish is now naked in this river, and he just decided he's going to do tshuva. He's not going to be a bad guy anymore. He's going to have to go and start learning Torah and cleanse himself and repair himself. He wants to get his clothes. But he was not able to muster up the physical strength to swim from where he was in the river to the shore to go and get his clothing. But you just jumped all the way in. And Rav Yochanan told you, you're so strong, you're so powerful, you're so mighty. You should use all that strength for learning. So if you could leap from one end to the other, what, you can't swim back now to shore? Says Rashi, what's the pshat? Says Rashi over here, he was not able to leap like he was initially into the water. The Mishakabel of old Torah, because from the moment that he accepted the yoke of Torah on himself, Tashash Koichai, his strength waned and weakened. He lost his physical strength. Reish Lakish no longer had the koyach to go and leap out of the water and go even just to get his clothes. Does anybody know how much strength it takes for a person who lived his whole life in sin to do tshuva? Does anybody know how long it takes for a person who spent his whole life as an Amar, as an ignorant person, to sit down and start learning Torah from Aleph Beis all the way through Shas? How many hours and how much sleep he had to push away from his eyes, and how he had to stand up at the shtender to make sure he wouldn't fall asleep, or maybe he did like the Rogachover, he would tie his long payas to the pegs on the wall behind him, and if he would start falling asleep in the middle of the night, he would be jolted by the pull on his head and he would wake up. In order for a person to be able to learn Torah day and night, it takes such koyach, such strength. And the Torah over here, the Gemara over here is saying that Torah's mateshes koichai, it weakens the strength of a person. Elamai, the Gemara is telling us that what does the Torah weaken? It weakens the koyach, it weakens the strength of the physical world that normally is pulling a person on all sides to get inside of it. But when a person will dedicate themselves to Torah, when that's the kind of a life that they want, when that's what they're striving for, suddenly the powers of Olam Hazeh, of this world, the desires that are dancing in front of us all the time that seem so tantalizing, the pleasures that we are so used to, that we immerse ourselves in, they suddenly become meaningless to us. Because we are tasting the realest pleasure in this world, and that is the pleasure of Torah. And then all of the koichais of ruchnius, all the koichais of asmad, of diligence, all the koichais of kedusha, all of those powers which maybe were dormant in a person, suddenly get turned on. And whatever the body wants, and wherever the body is going, whatever the body wants to chase, it doesn't matter to the person anymore. Reish Lakish became the great Reish Lakish because he was able to quell the whole physical world that was around him, and he made it, it's no longer important to me. I want to refocus and channel all my energies into that which is most divine, and that is the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given him. I just got a phone call from one of my students who's in seminary this year in Eretz Yisrael. She comes from a very fine family, and they are well-to-do. And she's already getting nervous. She said, I lived such a ruchnistic year this year. She said, I lived so below how I grew up, so below my means. She said, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, I didn't go here, I didn't go there. And she said, I'm so happy. And I'm so satisfied. And I'm so connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My davening is a different davening. My Yirah Shamayim is a different Yirah Shamayim. My life is a different life. She said, seminary is ending next week, and I'm coming home. I'm coming home to the big house. I'm coming home to the nice cars. I'm coming home to the Pats and to La Gondola. I'm coming home. My mother wants to go shopping with me already. She says, you need new clothes for next year. And we're going on a special shopping trip in New York. She said, I'm nervous. What's going to be with all of the growth that I had this year in my ruchnius and my spirituality? How am I going to fuse together the spiritual and the physical worlds? In the real black and white of Yiddishkeit, in the world of Torah and the Rishonim, the Bali Musa and the like, it is very almost impossible to fuse together the worlds of Ruchnius and Gashmius. Right? The famous Gemara, which tells us that the greatest struggle that a person has in this world is the guf versus the neshama. is the body versus the soul. The body wants everything this world has to offer, and the neshama wants nothing that this world has to offer. The neshama wants from the loftiest, greatest heights in the world, it wants to embrace HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Kedusha and the Ruchnius. The body wants absolutely nothing at all to do with that. What are we going to do over here? But the body and the soul, they're trapped together as one. A parable to what is it comparable to a king who has a beautiful, majestic orchard with beautiful and luscious fruits that are growing. And he calls in two of his prized guards, his shoymrei hapardes, those who guard the orchard. One of them is blind and one of them is lame. So they're standing there in the orchard, and the lame one who has eyes looks out in the distance and he sees there are fig trees that are in full bloom, and they can even see like the liquid that is dripping out of the figs. And he says to his blind counterpart over here, wow, you should see those figs. They look luscious and delicious. I wish that I could get them, but I'm lame. I can't walk over there. So the blind man says, I wish that I could see them, but I got legs. So why don't you jump on my back and you direct me and guide me, and I'll draw you close. You'll grab off the figs, and then we'll sit down and we'll enjoy. And sure enough, says the Gemara, that's exactly what they did. The lame man jumps onto the back of the blind man, and he tells him right, left, straight, here. He goes, he gathers in some of these delicious figs, and they gobble them up. And they do this a few times, and so some of the trees are looking pretty bare. And the king walks back into his orchard, and he looks around, and he says, who is the one who took my majestic figs off of the tree? And the layman says, couldn't have been me. I got no legs. The blind man says, couldn't be me. I can't see. I have no idea where I'd be going. And the king says, you fools, you think I don't know what you did? And he lifts up the lame man and he puts him on the shoulders of the blind man, and he says, I judge the two of you together as one, because you were conspirators to the sin itself. Says the Gemara, that's our life. We have a neshama that sees the most amazing things in the world, but it's a little bit lame in this world. It can't go around and do what it wants to. And you have a goof, you have a body that is not able to see what it wants. It's obtuse in this world, but it's got the legs to carry a person around wherever it wants to go. And therefore, the body and the soul, they join together for better or for worse as one. And that becomes the greatest struggle that a person is going to go through in this world. How do you make the separation? Reish Lakish was a man that lived with his goof all of his life. Suddenly, the neshama turns on, and the body is obsolete. Doesn't need it anymore. The body is gone. And Reish Lakish can't even bring out the strength in his body to swim across the ocean, the river, and get back. Because once that your main focus and your energy is in Torah, is in Ruchnius, is in Kedusha, so then the things of this world, they don't matter as much. My cousin, who was one of my cousins, who was one of the original Balei Tshuva of the world, he was from Rav Noach Weinberg's first and earliest Talmidim. Before there was an Eshet Torah, Rav Weinberg had a yeshiva out in, I believe, in the Tanya, or the Tveria, and he would sit and he would learn with them for hours, and he went on to become Baruch Hashem, a Talmud of Scheinberg and others. And he came back the first time that he was frum to his family. He started off on a kibbutz. It's a very fascinating story. He was on the kibbutz one day, and there's a girl in the fields working with him, a young girl. And she looks at my cousin, a big guy with a big red beard, real kibbutznik, no yarmulke, probably sandals, the whole thing. And she says, Ata Yehudi? Are you Jewish? He says, Ma, what are you talking about? Of course I'm a Jew. She said, okay, you don't look Jewish. And that itself sent him on a whole quest to try to figure out what does it mean to be a Jew. He ended up being a B'nai Braker in the end of his life. He told me that when he came home for the first time from yeshiva, after he was already learning and he was from, his parents were besides themselves. They couldn't understand. They had such a nice life. He came from a very well-to-do family. Parents owned markets and everything. And he comes home, and one of the first nights, his mother decides she's going to make him his favorite meal. Big, fat, juicy steak, dripping with onions and mushrooms and all baked potato, everything, all the trimmings. She calls him in. She says, Jerry, no, come sit down and eat. He looks at his mother. The food is treif. He can't eat it. He looks at his mother. He says, Mom, I can't eat that. So what do you mean you can't eat that? This is your favorite food. He said, yeah, but it's not kosher. Come on, what's the big deal? Come on, eat it. I made it just for you. Come on, smell the onions. It's so good. He said, Ma, I want you to know one thing. I didn't even miss the steak and onions for a minute while I was in Eretz Yisrael. I think in the Baal Tshuva handbook, they say that's the wrong thing to tell your mother who just made a mistake. But the bottom line is, the point is the point. And that is that because I attached myself to Ruchnius, I attached myself to Torah, I became one with the Ribbono Shel Olam. So the big, juicy steaks that you used to make for me and that you made for me right now, it's not on my mind, Mom. It's not what I'm thinking about. Tashas koichai, my strength, my immersion, my connection with the physical world, it has depleted. It doesn't interest me. I'd rather eat another page of Gemara. I'd rather eat a Rashi in the Chumash. I'd rather devour the Ramchal, Mesil Zishar, Mederech Hashem. I'm not interested in all of that. So the Vilna Gaon, who tried twice in his life to go to Eretz Yisrael, and both times, as he said, Min HaShamayim HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped him. He obviously did not want him to go. But before he embarked on his journey, he wrote the very famous Igeres Hagra, the letter to his wife and to his mother-in-law of how they should prepare themselves for their eventual aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. He told them, I'm going to go to Eretz Yisrael, the land that everybody dreams of, where everybody wants to go. I'm going to go and check it out, make sure that that it's okay for us. I'll settle in, and once I settle in, I'm going to send for you. But if you want to come to Eretz Yisrael, you have to be prepared. And so he writes a letter, Igeres Hagra. It's a letter filled with fascinating mussar and insights and depth. And it's really a compilation of the Vilna Gaon's ideas on what it means to be a Jew. And one of the things that he writes is the following. The world is compared to someone who is drinking salty water. A person who is thirsty, and they pick up a glass of salt water, and they start drinking it. As it's going down, they feel, oh, good, Hashem, I'm quenching my thirst. It appears to them that they are being satiated and hydrated. However, they know that once they stop drinking with some yoiser, they will be even thirstier than they were before. He's drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. His stomach is filling up with liquid. He can't even take another sip. And suddenly when he finishes drinking, he realizes, I'm really thirsty, but I just drank so much water. But you're drinking salt water. Salt water puts salt in your mouth and makes you even thirstier. The more that a person has an immersion in this world, I think I'll get that, I'll get that, I'll get that. I was just somewhere the other day, and somebody was showing me pictures of his little grandson playing in his clothing closet. So I'm looking at the picture. First of all, the closet is about as big as this room over here. And then I see that there's like one shelf after another, and there's like a lot of colors. And I can't see the picture very well. And as I look in, I realize The man has rows and rows and rows of shoes. I don't know, I thought he only had 2 feet, but he has rows and rows of shoes. So many shoes, he would put Imelda Marcus out of business. And in those shoes that were there, there's colors, bright, blue, yellow, green, orange, all different things. So what happened? The guy bought 1 pair of shoes. Those are nice shoes. I like those shoes. Maybe I need another color just because I don't always wear black and white. Maybe I'm going to wear some blue one day. I'll get some blue shoes. Then he's wearing his blue shoes. Says, those are dark. But like my outfit, the color scheme is light. So I need some light blue shoes to go along with my light blue clothing. So he buys light blue shoes. And then one day he's wearing green. He says, you know what? Can't wear black with green. Can't wear brown with green. Can't wear blue with green. I need green. Then he has different shades of green. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. Says the Vilna Gaon. You know the way that it works? The way that it works is the more gashmis that a person brings into their life, the less satisfied they are going to be. And it will always leave a person hungering and hunkering for more and for more and for more. Says the Midrash on this week's Parsha, that if a person wants to be someone that's going to have a real connection with the Torah, they will be a person that will have an inner world with Torah Hashem Tamima. There's only one way to do it. They have to make themselves hefker, like the midbar. They have to make themselves ownerless, like the wilderness that the Torah itself was given in. How does a person do that? As it says over here, Shalai lahakpid al shum davar midiver olam. So what that the person took the slice of pizza that you wanted? You get over it. So what that he took the cookie that you were interested in, you were dreaming about. It's like kids, they have in their mind sometimes they're dreaming. I was by a Sheva Brachas once, and one of the brothers of the Kala was a youngish kid. He was told like 2 or 3 days before the Sheva Brachas, which was at like some fancy restaurant, that the meal is going to be steak. And so this kid was going around telling all of his friends, though, I'm going to my Sheva Brachas with my sister tonight. It's going to be steak, big fat steaks. And he gets to the Sheva Brachas and he's telling you, okay, don't fill yourself up on the salads. Don't eat too much bread. The steak is coming. The steak is coming. Okay, fine. You're a little guy. We're a little bit bigger. We can have the salads and the bread before. He's like, I'm telling you, you're going to see the size of the steak. Don't fill yourselves up. And this kid is getting excited. And then they bring out the main course. And they bring out flanken. And the kid has a meltdown. He has a meltdown because for 3 days he was dreaming about the steak at his sister's Sheva Brachas, and Nebuch, they only served flanken on the bone instead. It was a little bit chewy, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't the same as steak, but he was willing, and then he ended up ruining the rest of the Sheva Brachas himself. He started crying. I had to take him outside. I had to try to calm this kid down. He was in a bad mood and he couldn't pull himself together. Because the more that a person is makpid, is particular about the things of this world, the more difficult it is going to be for them to connect themselves to that which is the most valuable thing in the world, that's Torah and Ruchnius. Gashmi is the physical world, takes us away from the Ruchnius. And the Ruchnius world is supposed to take us away from the Gashmius. And we live in a society right now where it's exactly the opposite of what the Torah says. The world at large is all about the Gashmius, and the Ruchnius, the spirituality, has taken not just the back seat, but it's all the way in the back of the bus over there with Rosa Parks. It's not even close. It's not even close. Can I get away with saying something like that? Not
perfect,
sure.
except maybe she got busted for sitting in the front or wouldn't go to the back.
Right, okay.
But it worked. It was
Okay,
good.
okay, fine. Close enough. So what is a person who wants to be an Erlich Yid? He wants to be a true Jew. He wants to be a person that's going to be connected to the Torah more. He wants more of the ruchnius, more of the spirituality in his life. What is a person going to do? When everywhere that you go, we are confronted and we're confounded by the gashmis, by the physicality and the desires of this world. So we cannot become hermits, and we cannot become monks and go live on a mountain by ourselves. We're not going to become Catholic priests who will not get married and have wives and have children. We're not going to do that. That's not what the Torah wants. But it must be that there has to be a way that within the confines of the Torah, using the physical world the way that it wants it to be used, we're going to be able to transform the Gashmias into Kedusha, into Ruchnius. I just heard the very famous story about Rabbi Burstein, who lives in a very large house in the city, for those of you that have ever been there before. And the reason that he got that house was because he was, I believe he had 11 children at the time. He was living like in a 2 or 3 bedroom townhouse, and there wasn't much room there. And there was a wealthy man who had built this big, beautiful house. He had no children, he had no heirs, and he was living in this house by himself. And he said, it doesn't make any sense. Why did I build myself this huge house? And then he saw Rabbi Burstein one day, and he said to Rabbi Burstein, you know what? You are the manayil of one of the top schools in our city, in our country. He said, it is below your dignity to live in such a place. You need rafchus, you need space, your kids need to be able to spread out, you need to have enough room. So Rabbi Burstein, I'm going to make you a deal. I don't need my house. I'm going to donate my house to Beis Yaakov on one condition. You and your family have to move into this house. So Burstein and his wife came and looked at the house. And they said, how could the Bursteins move into such a house? Passionate people. We're simple people. You come from Williamsburg, she came from somewhere in Boston. We live simply with our kids. We give drushes about don't buy into LA. How can we live in such a house? So they called Rabbi Avram Pa'am. Rabbi Pa'am was the Rosh Hashiva of Torah Vadas at the time. He was known as one of the premier Rosh Yeshivas and Das Torah of the generation. And they called him, and they had a list of about 7 or 8 reasons why they felt that they should not take the house. And they sat on the phone with him, and they went through every single reason of why they, the Burstein, should not own such a gashmistic, a big house. And he deflected every single question, every single reason that they had on the page. And he turned every single one around, and he showed them that if you will end up converting the gashmias into ruchnias, you'll convert the dining room table to a place of chesed. You will make the house into a place where the doors are always open for achnasas orchim, for the aniyim and the like. So then that house is not gashmias. That house becomes ruchnias. That house becomes a center of Torah, of avodah, and of chesed. So there's a very interesting thing in their house, which you don't find by many other homes. When you walk in, the next time that you walk into their house, you'll see there's like a foyer, and there's a hallway that's leading into the house. On the sides of both walls are pictures of Gedolei Yisrael. Usually people have the pictures of Gedolei Yisrael, they have them in the dining room, the father has in his office, maybe there's one in a living room over there. But when you walk into this house, along the walls are pictures of all the Gedolim that they wanted to hang up. So Rabbi Burstein said, why did we do that? Because we wanted to remind ourselves, it's not about the house. It's not about the big walls and the high ceiling. It's about making this house into a place that is Toradic, that is Ruchnius, that will be able to transform and convert Gashmi into Ruchni. So that will be our avodah. That will be the job that we have to do. We're not going to go live in a wilderness, except maybe on the camping trip. Maybe we'll have to keep this in mind while we're there. That will prepare us for having more of a connection to Torah.
You sleep there.
Yeah, maybe. But we have to take the gashmias that we have, because you're not going to get rid of it. Most likely you're not going to get rid of your car. You're not going to get rid of your house. You're not going to get rid of your clothing. It means you don't have to go to the store every single day and buy new clothes. You don't have to buy the most expensive suit that's on the rack, the fanciest, flashiest tie that's there, or the most expensive shoes. You don't have to do that. That's one way to cut back from the world of Gashmi. You go to the restaurant, they have in these steakhouses, even in Los Angeles, they have the 40-ounce steak. Yeah. And if you don't buy the 40-ounce steak, they tell you, why don't you get the 40-ounce steak? You and your son, you and your wife, you split it over here. Just enjoy. Come on, we pour the hot, the liquor on top, then we burn it up on fire in front of your eyes, and everybody's watching, taking pictures, slice it up like this, carve the cow. You don't have to get it when you go to the restaurant. You can get fish. You can get a 12-ounce steak. 12-ounce steak is better than a 40-ounce steak. First, you can do that. A little something petite, whatever they call it in French over there. But whatever gashmis that we do have, and we have enough, we have to make it into something that becomes ruchnius. And if a person transforms and they convert and they take it to a higher level, so then they have just made themselves into a midbar, into a wilderness, into a desert, an ownerless desert, even though that we have so much that the world itself is offering us. Rus Hama'avia, who is the mother, who is the main protagonist in the story of Shavuos, her name is Rus. Rus is Reish, Vav, Saf. And the Gemara says it's a language of Rava. Rava, the Gemara explains, is that Dovid HaMelech was marvehi, was meravehi, satiated HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of his beautiful Tehillims. He took the words of Tehillim and he sang out praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Dovid, who is like the great-grandson of Rus, who ends up being the lineage of Mashiach, his words of Tehillim were so pleasurable and satisfying and gratifying in the eyes of Hashem. The Vilna Gaon says over here, you know why mayim maluchim, why salty water is so bad? Yidmelo shemarve, because you think that you are satiated, you think that you have pleasure, but some of Yosef, but you're really thirstier than you were before. The koyach of Torah is that it teaches us how to be satisfied with that which we have in the physical world. It teaches how to be satiated with that what we have. Reb Revda Zatzal used to say, he has no problem if you pile up your plate this high with food when you want to serve yourself. You're about tired, you're taking too much, no problem. He said, take as much as you want for the first time around, but don't take seconds. You don't need seconds. Rather, you fill up your plate and then finish with everything that's on there, but don't indulge in seconds. Because once you do, you're training the desires for more and for more and for more. So whether we're holding by these things or not holding by these things, but the message of the Torah is that if a person wants to have a connection to the most spiritual entity in the world, which is Torah, we have to work on becoming more spiritual beings ourselves. How do we do that? When we remove our immersion in the physical world, and we begin to learn how to use the physical world for the ruchnius, for the spirituality. A chicken is a great little animal, and it was made for a Shabbos table. And when you put it in the oven and you have in mind Shabbos and you have in mind Yom Tov and you have in mind your guests and you have Achnas Orchim and Chesed and the like, you make a meal for one of the people that's in need of a meal and you deliver it and you give it to them. So you took a chicken who was once upon a time walking in Empire Farms, and now he is a Chesed mobile on somebody's table. They'll make brachas on him and they'll be able to enjoy him. So as we continue to climb towards Kabbalah Satira in the Shloishes Yimei Hagbala, these 3 days of preparation beforehand, which the 3 days are in order to remove us from the physical world, to make us more ruchnius, like we see in the story of Reish Lakish, and like we see in the words of the Vilna Gaon. And that is that the more that a person begins to lose the adherence to this world, the more that the neshama gets turned on and becomes stronger. And in that zechosim Yetz Hashem, we then become connected with the most powerful spiritual entity in the world, which is the Torah itself. And like it says in the Zohar, Yisrael Araisa v'kuchabrichu chadhu, the Jewish people, Araisa and the Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are all one. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all ruchnius, there's no gashmius. The Torah is all ruchnius, there's no gashmius. Klal Yisrael has gashmius. If we connect ourselves to Torah, we connect ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we can elevate that into a world of ruchnius, and then we can be connected to Hashem and to His Torah. Have a wonderful evening and a good Yom Tiv, Chag Sameach and Shavuos.